In 1933, when the stone cover was finally lifted, silence spread through the room. Not because of reverence, but shock. No one expected what appeared beneath the glass, especially not a body that seemed untouched by the slow violence of time. Years had passed, decades layered over decades, yet the first faces leaning forward felt a strange hesitation, as if their eyes refused to accept what their reason insisted must already be gone, altered, erased by ordinary decay. The glass reflected faint light across skin that did not carry the expected marks of collapse, and in that quiet instant, the room shifted from routine procedure into something unspoken, as though a question had quietly entered without asking permission. No fragrance of dust rose, no harsh sign of corruption declared itself, and this absence felt louder than any sound, pressing gently against every witness, urging them to reconsider what they thought they understood about time and endings. Hands rested where they should not have remained so composed.
Saint Catherine Labouré, help our faith.
Creating an unease that was not fear, but a growing awareness that something meaningful was unfolding quietly. Only then did some whisper the name Saint Catherine Labouré, not as an explanation, but as a fragile reference point, because nothing about the scene behaved like an answer. It behaved more like an invitation to look again. Those present searched for signs of intervention, hidden mechanisms, or forgotten preparations. Yet every angle they checked returned the same quiet resistance, as if the moment refused to be reduced into categories familiar to ordinary explanations. Time itself seemed confused, because decay usually announces itself boldly, but here it hesitated, lingering at the threshold, leaving behind a presence that felt neither dramatic nor staged, only disturbingly calm. Some stepped back instinctively, others leaned closer, drawn by an urge they could not name, sensing that this was not merely about preservation, but about a story that had chosen a body as its final language. No proclamation was made, no declaration offered clarity, yet the silence continued shaping attention, slowly guiding every thought toward an uncomfortable realization that explanations might come later, but the moment itself demanded to be felt first. What unsettled the witnesses most was not what they saw, but what failed to appear, because absence, when it arrives intact, can feel heavier than presence, especially when it contradicts everything experience has trained us to expect. As the glass was sealed again, one truth lingered without sound, that Saint Catherine Labouré had remained silent in life, yet here, without movement or voice, something enduring had chosen to speak through her at last. Saint Catherine Labouré did not live a life that announced itself. Her days passed without spectacle, yet beneath the rhythm of ordinary service, something unseen gathered quietly, as if significance was forming in places no one thought to examine. Those who crossed her path remembered nothing remarkable at first, only a calm presence, a steady gaze, and a manner that never competed for attention, which later felt strange, because invisibility itself began to feel intentional. She performed the same tasks repeatedly, day after day, without deviation, yet repetition did not dull the atmosphere around her. Instead, it sharpened curiosity, suggesting that consistency might be hiding something deliberately restrained. No journals explained her inner world, no declarations clarified intention, and this absence became its own signal, because silence, when sustained over years, begins to feel less like emptiness and more like containment. Even within communal walls where stories tend to circulate freely, her life resisted narrative, creating a subtle friction, as if meaning was present but unwilling to surface until conditions were exactly right. When the name Saint Catherine Labouré surfaced quietly among whispers, it did not resolve confusion. It deepened it, because nothing about her visible life seemed proportionate to the weight that now followed it. People sensed that the ordinary frame was insufficient, that routine could not fully explain the stillness surrounding her, and this realization pushed attention forward, inviting questions that refused to settle comfortably. Moments accumulated without announcement, small and easily overlooked, yet together they formed a pattern that felt intentional, as if preparation was happening quietly, without anyone being asked to notice. Nothing dramatic interrupted the flow, and that restraint increased tension in an unexpected way, because when nothing forces attention, curiosity begins to lean forward on its own. The more ordinary her days appeared, the more disproportionate the later discovery felt, suggesting that the story was not accelerating toward visibility, but compressing itself inward. By the time curiosity sharpened into anticipation, it became clear that this life was not meant to be understood chronologically, but unfolded backward, beginning where explanation usually ends. Only later did the quiet logic emerge that Saint Catherine Labouré had not concealed meaning to confuse observers, but to allow it to mature, undisturbed, until it could finally reveal itself. Saint Catherine Labouré moved through familiar corridors when something subtle began shifting, not abruptly, but with a pressure that gathered slowly, as if the ordinary rhythm was being nudged aside to make room for something unannounced. There was no visible sign, no voice calling her attention, yet awareness sharpened unexpectedly, creating the sense that a threshold had been reached, one that could not be identified, only felt in the tightening of perception. Moments stretched without resistance, ordinary seconds carrying unusual weight, suggesting that time itself was slowing deliberately, allowing awareness to catch up before whatever followed revealed even a fraction of itself. She did not stop walking immediately, which made the sensation stranger because anticipation grew without instruction, pressing gently forward, guiding attention towards something that had not yet chosen a form. The surroundings remained unchanged, walls steady, air calm, yet familiarity began to feel thin, as though surface reality was quietly yielding, preparing to allow something deeper to pass through unnoticed. When Saint Catherine Labouré sensed the pause, it carried no instruction or command, only a stillness dense enough to gather thought, drawing attention inward without offering explanation or relief. This was not the kind of moment that announces itself dramatically. Instead, it compressed quietly, increasing focus as if whatever approached required presence rather than reaction, attention rather than movement. Breath remained steady, yet each inhale felt slightly measured, creating the awareness that something invisible had entered the space, not forcefully but with a certainty that resisted dismissal. No conclusion formed, no image clarified the experience, and that incompleteness sharpened curiosity further, because the mind sensed approach without arrival, movement without disclosure. What unsettled the moment was its restraint, the way it held back revelation, suggesting that meaning was not absent, only waiting for a depth of attention most moments never demand. Awareness hovered at the edge of articulation, close enough to sense significance, yet denied clarity, creating a tension that felt purposeful, as though disclosure would arrive only after readiness settled fully. Long afterward, it became clear that Saint Catherine Labouré had not encountered spectacle in that instant, but invitation, a quiet opening that would later explain why silence had always followed her so closely. Saint Catherine Labouré passed from this world without spectacle, her departure as unassuming as her life, leaving no public signal that anything unfinished remained, yet the stillness she left behind felt unusually deliberate. There were no immediate signs inviting reflection, no sudden re-evaluation of her days, only the steady return of routine, which paradoxically deepened curiosity, because unresolved stories often hide most effectively within normal flow. Years advanced quietly, and memory softened her presence, not erasing it, but smoothing edges until her life became background, a faint outline few felt compelled to revisit or question too closely. Time did what time usually does, layering events, shifting priorities, pulling attention elsewhere. Yet beneath that movement, something remained untouched, as though waiting was part of the design rather than a delay. No one anticipated reversal, because nothing demanded it, and that absence of expectation allowed years to compress quietly, storing significance without pressure, without announcement, without resistance. When Saint Catherine Labouré was mentioned, it surfaced gently, often without emphasis, as if the name itself carried weight best handled carefully, not pressed forward, not yet invited into full light. The passage of time did not weaken the unanswered questions, it refined them, shaping curiosity into something quieter but sharper, less impatient, more attentive to the possibility of delayed meaning. What lingered was not mystery alone, but proportion. The sense that the scale of her quiet life did not match the subtle gravity that continued to follow it forward through years. Silence accumulated, not as absence but as structure, forming a frame strong enough to hold something significant without revealing it prematurely or allowing it to dissolve into forgetfulness. Waiting ceased to feel passive because endurance itself began to signal intention, suggesting that time was not erasing evidence, but preserving it carefully for a moment yet unnamed. As decades converged, anticipation sharpened without direction, creating a tension that pointed forward without revealing its destination, as though the story insisted on patience before disclosure. Only later would it be understood that Saint Catherine Labouré had not been forgotten, but set aside by time itself, held in reserve until the moment's silence would finally be asked to answer. When the moment returned at last, Saint Catherine Labouré stood at the center without presence, as the sealed past reopened, transforming years of restraint into a single instant where silence prepared to complete what words never attempted. The glass did not dramatize what lay beneath it, yet clarity arrived immediately, because the eye recognizes contradiction faster than reason, and here, expectation fractured the instant it made contact with reality. Skin held form without collapse, hands rested without surrender, and the face carried no urgency, creating a tension that moved faster than disbelief, forcing witnesses to recalibrate everything decay had taught them. No signal announced holiness, no label guided interpretation, yet coherence emerged on its own, because meaning does not always arrive explained. Sometimes it simply stands intact and waits to be acknowledged. The room filled with attention rather than noise, a collective stillness forming quickly, as if instinct recognized that this was not a spectacle to consume, but a boundary moment to absorb. Only then did Saint Catherine Labouré resolve from abstraction into focus, her life suddenly aligning with the body before them, collapsing distance and revealing that waiting had always been part of the message. Questions accelerated without answers slowing them, because explanation felt secondary to recognition, and recognition arrived fully formed, demanding attention before interpretation could catch up. What mattered was proportion finally restored, the quiet life now matching its enduring trace, proving that significance can be stored invisibly, only to surface whole when time allows alignment. The moment refused to close neatly, extending its impact beyond observation, because once contradiction enters experience, it continues working inward, rearranging assumptions long after sight withdraws. There was no demand placed on belief, only an invitation to notice, and that openness carried force, because nothing persuades more steadily than coherence left standing without defense. Silence completed its work by remaining intact, leaving behind not shock, but orientation, a recalibration that suggested some truths arrive best when nothing tries to impress them forward. In the end, Saint Catherine Labouré required no final explanation, because the answer had already taken shape, not spoken aloud, but held steadily where time itself had chosen to pause. Saint Catherine Labouré, today we turn toward you with open hearts, bringing the hidden fears, silent struggles, and unspoken hopes of everyone watching this video right now. Intercede before God for those seeking healing, peace, direction, and renewed faith. Let weary hearts feel strength again, let troubled minds find calm, and let quiet lives be filled with divine purpose. Stand beside families, comfort the lonely, protect the vulnerable, and remind us that nothing offered in trust is ever unseen. If this prayer is stirring something within you, gently join us by writing Amen below and allow this moment to become prayer together.